Welcome to the first ever JSWP Wisdom Podcast. In this first episode, we're going to dig deep. We're going to pull out some gems and polish them off to see if they're diamonds or just rocks. We'll get into some definitions, looking at how knowledge and wisdom stack up to each other, and we'll get into what you can expect to hear on this show moving forward. Well now, knowledge, wisdom. If you don't know yet, I have another podcast called Knowledge, or more precisely, The Jared Show Knowledge Podcast that airs every Sunday and Tuesday nights at 10 p.m. And now I have this show called The Wisdom Podcast. Today, as we dig out some of that wisdom about the term wisdom and knowledge, I'll get a chance to give you a better idea of why I have two podcast shows and why I name them Knowledge and Wisdom. Now, some might say they are the same, so who cares? Or knowledge is something that turns into wisdom with experience. And while these two answers seem logical, depending on your point of view, I'd like to point out that the lesson provided in learning the difference is one that will help us live life better, with more understanding, and therefore more compassion. And let's face it, we could all use a bit more understanding and compassion these days. First, let's look at each term individually, get a good definition of it, and see how they stack up to each other. Are they the same, or is there a more meaningful, a more powerful idea lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered? This podcast is presented to you commercial-free by Missionary Life Ministries Productions. Please feel free to visit missionarylife.info to get more information about God, hope, life, and much more. Alright, and welcome back. Now, let's start with knowledge. Most people seem to think it's easier to define the term knowledge than it is wisdom, as wisdom is a bit more mysterious. So we'll start with knowledge. Now, Google, or more specifically the Oxford Languages, which is Google's source, states that knowledge is these two things. One, facts, information, and skills acquired by a person through experience or education, that education being theoretical or practical understanding. What is a particular field, or in total facts and information, the transmission of knowledge. Or two, in a more philosophical understanding, would be true justified belief, certain understanding as opposed to opinion. Awareness or familiarity gained by experience of a fact or situation. I.e., the program had been developed without his knowledge. Right? We see here that knowledge is, in fact, facts. Hilarious, I know. But street smarts versus book smarts, or experience versus theoretical practice, that's how we know of knowledge. Knowledge is all of those things and a bag of chips. Do people still say that? I just did. I think people should still say that. Anyway, knowledge is what you know. And that may seem very simple, but it's actually very profound if you stop and give it a second to sink in. How do you know what you know? How do you know what you look like or sound like? How do you know 2 + 2 = 4? How did you acquire this knowing? Or did you acquire it? Was it something that you just knew, something you were born with, this knowing? Well, some people like to go down that rabbit trail of just knowing. I prefer not to use that supposition. Supposition being an uncertain or unfactual belief and claim. To say someone came into this world knowing something that no one else did or not many people know is to say that we all didn't start on an equal mental playing field. And I reject that supposition. Rejecting the I just know theory, we arrive at the question, how do you know? The answer to this question is simple. I learned it from books, TV, movies, other people. In other words, the world taught me. Knowing the definition for knowledge, right, I think is a pretty good definition. We're ready for the deep and mysterious wisdom. So using our old trusty Google, aka the Oxford languages, we'll get a definition on which we can understand the term wisdom. So wisdom is defined as three things. 1, the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. The quality of being wise. 2, the soundness of an action or decision with regard to the application of experience, knowledge, and good judgment. And 3, the body of knowledge and principles that develops within a specified society or period, i.e. the traditional farming wisdom of India. Right? So here we see that wisdom is a quality. It is the soundness of an action, or using the knowledge we have, putting that knowledge to good use. Okay? And then we have to get into what is good use. So I think a great way to describe it so far would be learning how to discern what you've learned and when, where to use and apply your knowledge. Wisdom is the application of knowledge and how to do so. It is how you compile all the bits of information and apply it to any and all given situations. But what happens when the knowledge that you've acquired is wrong and you keep doing the same thing over and over again expecting a different result? Albert Einstein, and I will not get into my personal feelings about Albert Einstein at this point, but I do think he had a very good definition from this idea. He said, repeating the same thing over and over expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. So it's insane to apply the knowledge you have without getting a different result, even if that result is worse. This is where the idea of good judgment comes in. I think we tend to view someone or something as wise when the application of knowledge turns out to be beneficial and not make things worse. Having good judgment is another way of saying things worked out well. But if we cannot truly know all the consequences of our actions, then who's to claim good judgment? Who's to say giving the homeless person on the street $5 didn't lead to a violent, drunken night for someone else? Who knows if the fender bender wasn't actually a blessing in disguise? You truly don't know if you hadn't had a fender bender that day and had to stop to deal with it, that you wouldn't be in a major accident resulting in serious injury. So who's to know these things? So where does this wisdom, this good judgment come in? Right? These morals and values that we seem to all kind of take for granted. So if I'm acquiring knowledge and then I'm applying that knowledge with good judgment, right? And as our definition shows us of wisdom, the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment, the quality of being wise, the soundness of an action or decision with regard to the application of experience, knowledge, and good judgment, the body of knowledge and principles that develops within a specified society or period. So if wisdom is as it says, the soundness of action with regard to experience and knowledge, paired with good judgment, where does that good judgment come from? We're going to get into that. I'm going to let you think about this for just about 30 seconds. Play some music. You can kind of think about it for a minute. Pause it even if you want to and think about it for a second. And we'll be back. And welcome back to the Jared Show Wisdom Podcast. Now let's get into that good judgment a little bit later. Right now we're going to stick with the differences between wisdom and knowledge. So an easy way to remember the difference between knowledge and wisdom is inside and outside. Knowledge comes from outside of you, whereas wisdom resides within you, okay? So think about it this way. So knowledge comes in through your five senses, right? So taste, touch, smelling, hearing, and vision, right? Now, these five senses go to your brain, and your brain kind of understands and takes all this data in. It collects data, and then it interprets that data. And I'll get into the brain and how synapses fires and pathways and all these things work at some other point. But just understand that your brain is like the CPU, the central processing unit for your body, but not necessarily for your mind, okay? So I happen to think that the mind and the brain are not the same. And I'll get into that at some point, mind versus brain. Not now, but we'll go with an idea right now of how the brain is more of a CPU unit, whereas the mind is the ghost in the machine. It's the collection of all of those things, okay? So if the mind and the brain are working together to process things, right? So it's collected data into your brain, and your mind is the thing that's processing all that. Now, if wisdom is the fact that you process all that, but now you're using good judgment to put that to good use, where does that good judgment come from? Okay? Now, that comes from morality. What to do in a given situation comes from morals and virtues. Now, where does that morality originally stem? Now, we're not really going to get into that right now, but I do want to make the point and emphasize that point, that in order to have morality, in order to have good judgment, you have to have morality. Now, personally, I think morality comes from something higher than us, right? A good analogy to this is, if it really were survival of the fittest, what would stop us as a human race from just beating up old ladies that live next to us and taking all their stuff? Where does that moral idea come from of, as human beings, we really shouldn't do that? I think if it's really survival of the fittest, we're probably not going to do those things. So again, let's draw back here a little bit and understand that knowledge is something that comes outside of you, in through your five senses, and you collect that data. And then it's wisdom that's on the inside. It's your mind. It's the thing that you're pairing, okay? So it's your body is collecting data, your brain, and really your mind at the end of the day are the ones that are interpreting that data. And really the morality, or your spirit, right? What you deem is this okay or not, is the way that you interpret things and how you present your wisdom. Now, I'm going to get into this at some point because I feel really passionate about it. But this postmodernism idea of your truth and my truth and his truth and their truth, that is ridiculous. Okay? At the end of the day, there's either the truth or there's a lie. When you have this middle ground and nobody knows where they stand, is it the truth or is it a lie? Is it, At the end of the day, 2 plus 2 equals 4. If I told you that 2 plus 2 equals 5, it's not my truth that I believe 2 plus 2 equals 5, and that's my truth. That's a lie, right? Now, with this channel, we're going to get really deep into a lot of different ideas concerning God, concerning the Bible, concerning other types of religion, concerning ideas and philosophies when it comes to life and other types of religion. But suffice it to say that wisdom comes from within and knowledge comes from outside of you. It's the best way to understand it just in basic elementary terms. So, like I said, knowledge comes out, wisdom comes from within, right? How this wisdom and knowledge really differ is what I'm going to get into in the next episode of this, and it's perspective and perception, okay? So, again, if knowledge comes out from outside in, and wisdom comes from inside out, right? Think of perception as that outside thing that you're seeing, right? So, for instance, if I had a virtual reality headset on my head, right, and I'm looking at something outside of myself, that's my perception of reality, right? That perception can be something like the world is against me, or the world is for me, or everybody loves me, or, I'm the coolest guy in the world, or I'm the most strong person in the world, or I'm the best basketball player, or whatever, right? Now, and like I said, we're going to get into this deeper on episode 2, but suffice it to say, perspective or perception is like knowledge. It's like out there coming at you, right? Perspective is the way that you see that, right? It's the way that you understand that. And a great way to understand perspective is attitude of gratitude. The general idea behind attitude of gratitude is that if you have the perspective of gratitude and you're always thankful for everything that comes your way, it's hard to get down when things don't seem to work out. And it's a great way to understand. That's a perspective that you have. Now, let's say your perception is that the world hates you, but you have the way that you counteract that, right, is an attitude of gratitude. Now, let's say you think everybody loves you, right? The way that that's counteracted, the way everybody loves you, is a level of arrogance or a level of entitlement, right? Let's say, these things generally counterbalance each other. That way it's like your eyes, right? One eye sees one way and another eye sees another, and they counterbalance each other. And they are capable of focusing on one thing at the same time and seeing that in that particular perspective, right? Now, if they didn't sync together, you would see blurry haziness or whatever. You'd see one eye would be looking at one thing. I've done this many times, actually, of closing one eye at one time and looking at something and seeing it shift back and forth from left to right. Or seeing how much I can see with one eye at one time. How much of a tree or how much of a whatever I'm looking at. It's an interesting thing to do. But what it does is it gives you an idea of what perception is and how those two things counterbalance each other. Knowledge and wisdom are somewhat the same, but you can go deeper into one and lose some of the other. So for instance, if I go deeper into wisdom and I rely more on wisdom, then knowledge doesn't necessarily have as much effect. If I'm not relying on my wisdom, a lot of people call that self-confidence, then the knowledge that's coming in will overtake me, and I'll think in those terms instead. If I have a good counterbalance, much like your eyes, then I'm going to see things very clearly, right? Now, while the attitude of gratitude is a useful tool in order to curb expectations, it is also a great showcase of what perspective is all about. And like I just said, what's interesting of why you have that attitude of gratitude, why you have your certain perspective or a certain perception, what shapes those things is a very interesting and a very amazing question to ask yourself. So I'm going to give you a minute to or about 30 seconds to kind of think all these kind of things over. Just remember that knowledge is something that comes from the outside in. And wisdom is something that comes from the inside out. That's why they say actions speak louder than words. Now, thoughts are things, and you can see what somebody's thinking by the way that they act, the way that they talk, body language, all these kind of things. And you can actually read somebody's perception and perspective from the way that they act and think. You can see if somebody's entitled. You can see if somebody thinks the world is all out to get them. I've lived through several different types of experiences. I've been in realms of thinking where I thought the world was always against me. I've been in realms where I was entitled and, I'm invincible. I think every teenager goes through that at some point. And I think every, mom or dad or, somebody that, you get past your 20s and you think the world's out to get you. So I think I've been through all those. I think it grants you more compassion and more understanding depending on what your perception and perspective is. If you're entitled, your compassion's going to be a little bit lower than if you think the world's out to get you. Depending on, like I said, depending on your point of view. And then that comes into ego and selfishness, and we'll get into those at some point, not right now, but like I said, I'll just give you about 30 seconds to kind of think about the difference between inside and outside. We'll be back. All right, and welcome back to the Jared Show Wisdom Podcast. So I want to get into, I've given you a pretty good idea of what knowledge and wisdom is. And I want to get into why I called these podcasts wisdom and knowledge. And it's actually a pretty simple thing. So basically, what's interesting, really quick, I'll run you through something really, really fun actually, is the wild thing about wisdom is it comes out as knowledge. Now, like I said before, in postmodern ideas of things, there is no such thing as truth, and everybody has their own truth, right? Really, what they're really trying to get to is the idea of wisdom versus knowledge. So my wisdom, my understanding, my collection of experiences mixed with my own morality comes out as my own truth, is the way that what they're saying. But they're saying it in a bad way. Because like I said, truth and lies is a pretty black and white situation. It's a pretty yes or no, up and down, left or right situation. Okay? A better way to describe that idea, I think they're trying to get across, would be, it's my wisdom, right? Destroying the idea of actual truth is how you get into a world of confusion. And that's somewhere I don't really want to be, right? So What's interesting is wisdom. When I speak wisdom, the things that I understand and I've put into practice and I know, to you it's going to come out as knowledge. As you hear this or you watch this or you think about this, to you it's knowledge. It's something you can take or leave. It's something coming in you through a couple of your senses, depending on how you're ingesting this. And because of that, because knowledge is anything that comes from out there, I want to be able to have a little fun with the knowledge channel. Whereas the wisdom one, I want to present it to you, and I want you to be able to kind of think about it and spin it around and see what you think about it. Wisdom is something we have, but when we try to impart it to someone else, it turns into knowledge. And I'm no different, right? I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Knowing what we know about good old knowledge and wisdom, I'll let you in on this secret. This podcast really isn't for you. It's for me. When we say wisdom, we have said it out loud. It comes back as when it sinks in deeper, right? So when I say this wisdom out loud, then I get knowledge to come back into my five senses. I spin that around a little bit, right? And then the whole cycle repeats itself, right? So the more that I do this, and I encourage anybody to do this, I know this sounds a little odd, but preach, right? No matter who you are, no matter what you're talking about, preach it. The only way to practice what you preach, the only way to learn something is to preach it. A lot of people say teach it, but I say preach it. Get out there and talk about it. Explain it to somebody. Explain what you mean to somebody. That's how you're going to learn more about it. That's how you're going to get better at it. So, cat's out of the bag. Secret's out. I'm doing the Wisdom Podcast to preach and practice. I enjoy it. I want to get deep. I want to learn more. The Knowledge Podcast is to have some fun. Talk about, amazing things like the Warriors or whatever. Basketball or current events or whatever. The Wisdom Podcast is really the message that I have for everyone. It's really the ideas that I've asked a lot of questions in my lifetime. Where do we come from? And who is God? And who is Jesus Christ? And who is Buddha? And who is, everybody, I've done comparative religion studies. I've done, different texts, the Vedas and Upanishads and all these different things, Mormonism and Jehovah's Witness and Judaism and all of these different things. And I've asked a lot of questions. And because I've asked a lot of questions, I've received a lot of answers. And I like to get deep into specific topics. God is a fun one for me. It's kind of like a mathematician, or a piano player, a musician. I enjoy it. But not all the time. I mean, I don't want to sit and play piano all day long every day. I do have particular works and particular pieces I'm working on. I want to put that out and I want to play that a lot. But there comes a point where I want to play, a little bit of boogie woogie and I want to play a little bit of Beethoven, So that's kind of what you're listening to here is some in-depth thoughts. I look at this as a conversation with a good friend. Sometimes you want to get deep, maybe get some advice, talk about God, and sometimes you just want to talk about the game last night or what's going on in your life, right? The Knowledge Podcast is like talking to a good friend and saying, hey man, how'd you like the game? How'd you like the Warriors? How'd you like all that stuff? The Wisdom Podcast is like, hey man, I need some advice, man. What would you do in this situation? That's kind of how I look at both of them. The great thing is, when you click on either podcast, you already know what you're getting. You don't have to gauge my mood or gauge my understanding. If you want advice, you just go click on it. If you want something else, go get that instead. You want to hang out and check things out, have some fun. We've gotten pretty deep in this episode. Let's come back up for air and sort it all. What do you think? So we've gotten into the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge comes from out there, whereas wisdom comes from within. Perception, or how you perceive the world against you or for you, and perspective, or how you are going to deal with the world, how you do or don't fit into the world. I did let the cat out of the bag as to this podcast is for me and it's for you, Again, I want to know more. I want to get deeper. I want to put these things into practice and learn more and understand more and try to gain more compassion, gain more knowledge, gain more wisdom. So this is for me and it is for you. But we did leave some things that were open-ended here. Perception and perspective. What is good judgment? Or how can we know if our actions help or hurt any given situation? We'll get into those ideas in the next episode. Perception and perspective. So that's it for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube. Let me know ideas you've had on some of the things I've said, or if you're listening to the podcast. You can go to Twitter and tweet me at TheJarredShow, or I soon will have a Facebook page ready to go for everything, for the entire thing, the whole Jared Show, knowledge and wisdom on both sides. Be able to continue doing that. I think I'm shooting for doing this podcast, the wisdom one, every Monday and Wednesday. So we'll have the knowledge one on Sundays and Tuesdays. We'll have the wisdom one on Mondays and Wednesdays. And we'll shoot for that, see what we can do, try to get a good schedule in on that, see how it goes. And so don't forget to check out the Knowledge Podcast for something a bit more lighthearted. I mean, not as deep, but still dropping some knowledge. The last one I just did was about video games and dropping some amazing stats on video games and some thoughts I had on that. And go check that out. There's still some knowledge in there. There's still some good solid facts and ideas in there. Also, go check out Missionary Life Ministries at missionarylife.info. I'm in the process of revamping that website. It does have a lot about me on there right now. As I was going about being a missionary and doing my thing, I ran into a lot of people that would ask me on the street, who are you? What are you affiliated with? What is this kind of thing? And I found myself, having to explain the same things over and over. How did I get saved and where did I come from? What am I affiliated with? So if you have those questions before I revamp that, you can go check that out right now. It's missionarylife.info, missionary life, all one word, .info. And it gives you my testimony, some of the things I've done, some of the things I'm going to be doing, kind of what I do. Things are a little bit different now with COVID and all that kind of stuff, so I've kind of gone in this direction a little bit more, but you can definitely go check that out. And I'll be adding a little bit more to what's going on there. A lot more of this type of interaction, a lot more life lessons and wisdom and knowledge that I've gained over the course of being a missionary and just living in general and asking questions and talking to a lot of people and reading a lot of the Bible. I think I'm almost done with reading the entire Bible. I feel like I've read the entire Bible throughout my lifetime, but I'm going over it again to make sure that I've done that. At the moment, I'm reading 1 Samuel, if that means anything to you. It's actually awesome because it's where David fights Goliath. But yeah, that. Sorry, I get off on tangents sometimes, but the website itself will be. We're gonna see what it's gonna be. I'm not really sure what that's gonna be yet. I want it to be something that's gonna be able to help people and be able to eventually be a real ministry that goes out and has people that help and that kind of thing. But if it's just nothing more than passing along helpful ideas and helpful questions to get to the, helpful answers, then so be it. I think that would be just fine. So go check that out if you have the time. And let me know. Let me know what you think. Read through my testimony and see how I got saved and some of the things that I've been through. And listen to more podcasts. You'll get to know me a little bit more. And, if you have any questions or comments, you can email me at TheJarredShow WisdomPodcast.com. I'd be more than happy to answer any and all your questions if I can. And I'll let you know up front. I don't know everything, so it may be that I can't answer your question. I don't know. But I'm more than willing to try. I'm more than willing to look it up. I'm more than willing to pray about it and see what comes about it. So let me know. If you have a question, let me know. You can email me or tweet me at TheJarredShow, or however you want to get a hold of me is fine. And I thank you so much for listening to the first episode. Stay tuned for the second one, coming out on Wednesday. And may God bless you.